Hello, welcome back to the Football Terrace. Yeah, apologies for my my laugh. The guys that made that thought it would be a good touch. How are you, Kieran? Long time no speak.
I'm good. The football industry, never dull, never quiet. I'm looking forward to actually it being football again rather than the nonsense that surrounds it.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I personally, as a football, my take on the game is very much we're fans here at the Football Terrace, so I enjoy the transfer element. I love the woulda, coulda, shouldas. How would this player fit in? I suppose the bad element to it, and I see people like yourself. I see the people like sort of Fabrizio Romano. It's that constant, constantly being badgered for information about transfers. How does this relate? I get it can become tiresome, and then a lot of the important elements surrounding football are often forgotten about. In my view, anyway. I think that's sort of fair to say in relation to that. But I totally get that, and it was great to have you on. I appreciate you coming on and spending some time to talk to us. All of you that are tuning in, please hit the like and share button for us. Really, really important that we get that done. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wanted to speak Liverpool very much because we've had a lot of conversations amongst ourselves as fans here on the Football Terrace around Liverpool making lots of profit over the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's circa £207 million. But yet there seems to be a reluctance for them to spend money this summer on new players. A lot of their fans becoming frustrated. And the Swiss at Swiss Ramble put out a very long and to myself, I come from a financial background, but still a very confusing thread into sort of the intricacies and details they go into around the money coming in, money going out, and what that actually means in real terms for the football fans. And I really appreciate you coming on to take some time to sort of speak to us about it. As a general overview, I mean, was there anything that they put out there that was a shock to you? Someone that's, of course, an expert in this field.
No. What Kieran put out, the Swiss Ramble, I know him well. Is his normal superb dissection of the finances. And what he was trying to do is to explain that Liverpool's ownership model is that they want the club to be self-sufficient. Although the club has made profits, it's been spent on things that you don't necessarily see. So all of the money that they've spent on the new training ground, all of the money they've spent on the stadium expansion, they've tried to pay down some of their borrowings as well. It's all dull, tedious stuff. It's not what we go to football for. We go to see excitement. Now, if the money's going out for all of those reasons, and then you throw in the pandemic, which is costing Liverpool, £3.5 million every home match, which isn't taking place, then there's not a lot of spare cash to throw around. And also, if you take a look at Liverpool's transfer approach over the course of the last sort of 4 or 5 seasons since Jurgen Klopp has taken over, they've bought the right players rather than just buying players for the sake of it.
Yeah.
If we take a look at other clubs, and I think Manchester United are a prime example, is that they've spent money, but they've not spent it well. And then 12 months later, you're in exactly the same problem you were in a year ago, except you've got less money in the bank. So Liverpool, they use what we refer to as a money ball or a data-based approach to player recruitment. If the right player comes up at the right price, then they will buy. So it's not a case of not being able to spend. It's a case of they're being a bit more cautious than usual. They're waiting to see what's happening to the prices in the market and taking it from there.
Yeah, which I think makes a great deal of sense for clubs to do. I suppose one of the questions that gets posed to me a lot, and I don't have the qualifications at all to answer it, is, and what Kieran mentions it here. He says what is somewhat puzzling is given that Liverpool are highly profitable in recent years, but it's when you look behind, you look at the revenue growth as an example. Which has grown high, but the expenses have gone up at the same time. Fans seem to struggle with understanding why the expenses go up at the same time as the TV broadcasting money has grown. I think I was reading here by like 79%, isn't it? I think revenue has grown by 79%, but the increase in wages, for instance, has grown by nearly 90% at the same time. And I think fans struggle to understand how that is possible.
Well, if you think about it, if you sign Virgil van Dijk for 75 million, that's the excitement as far as the transfer market is concerned. But he's going to be on realistically £10 million a year. So Liverpool are now committed to paying £10 million a year every year that Virgil van Dijk's at the club. If they've got any sense, and they have, they'll then try to get him with a contract extension. They've done that with some of the other existing players, Oxlade-Chamberlain and others. They sign contract extensions, and every time they do that, it's an extra £3 or £4 million on the wage bill. And once you've got the wage bill, if you take a look at Liverpool's wage bill, and I've got it in front of me, at the start of the decade, it was £114 million a year, and now it's £310 million. So I don't know about you, Terry. You're a more successful guy than I, but my pay hasn't trebled over the last decade. But footballers has at Liverpool's level. So that money is that's shuttling out every single season. That's a commitment that the club has, which means that there's sometimes less money to spend on other things. You take away the impact of the pandemic, and as far as Liverpool are concerned, I've said they get really good gate receipts. They have really good stadium tours. They have really good merchandise sales when fans come. I work in Liverpool, as you know. It's a really good place for conferencing and hospitality, and all of that's just been that's just disappeared. They've been taken out at the knees.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think it's you said talk about like players' wages trebling. If you look at Liverpool as a prime example, their expenses have grown as they become successful again, and that's very much the way football has gone. The agents are exceedingly good in the modern day game of getting players to be almost given their compensation for a club becoming more successful. The reason that I was reading here that the TV money has grown by 137 million pounds over the last 3 years. European TV money, basically the Champions League, it's an additional 70 million pound of income for them, and then there's been 72 million pound of commercial growth extra for Liverpool. And this is what I've been saying this to football fans for a while. That then reflects in what the players get paid, because the agents will sit down and say, well, you're only doing that because of Van Dijk, because of Mane, because of Mo Salah. And it's one of the only industries where the workers, as they were, can actually get paid a substantial amount of the money that they generate in. And it's, why the Man Uniteds of this world appear on paper to be paying over the odds because of our success on the field. But the fact is the revenues are so high, the players are accountable for bringing a lot of that in through one way, shape or form, and they managed to get a huge percentage of it. And I think Liverpool, would you say it's fair to say that if Liverpool continue to be successful and revenues continue to grow, it's highly likely that their wage bill will grow with it?
Yeah, because if you take a look at Liverpool's wage bill, in 5 of the last 6 years, it's been 56, 56, 57%. It's been at that constant level. So the players and the management team and the smart people that Liverpool employ, they are really good on the data analytics, on the Moneyball side of the game. They will share in that. And football is a talent-based industry. And in a talent-based industry, you need to pay to get the talent. And if you're successful on the back of it, then you need to sort of effectively give the bonuses. So for any football club which does win trophies, the players' bonuses tend to be very high. We saw potentially, I think, that Manchester United, had they not qualified for the Champions League this season, many players would have had 25% reductions in their pay packet. Now, they're not going to be selling the big issue on the back of that. We all know that. But 25% of a big number is, you'll still notice it, even if you're not in the habit of spending it. So it is linked to delivering, and Liverpool deliver. As far as the last few seasons are concerned, they qualified for the Champions League. They've won the Champions League. They've now won the World Club Championship. They've just won the Premier League. Well, that's all in their contracts. And every time you win a trophy, it's great for the club. It's great for the fans. It is great for revenues, but also it will hit the wage bill.
Absolutely. Just reading here, it says that much of the revenue growth, although they have seen huge revenue growth, as we mentioned, it's grown by 79% over the past 3 years, which is massive. But the wage bill has grown by 87%, as an example. And the amount of money they spend on players, and of course, we've been through this in the show before, fans still have to get their head around the fact that the majority of transfers are not paid cash up front. They're paid via the technique of amortization. That has also grown by 73%. So if you look at that as an example, they're almost, if you sort of average those off, their expenditure is grown at a faster rate than their income. And you don't need to be an economical genius to work out if you start spending not more than you've got coming in, but if your expenditure is rising at a higher rate than your income, there comes a point where cash wise you're going to be a little bit cash poor, even though you're going to operate with good profits.
Perfect, absolutely, Terry. So what Liverpool have done is they bought players on credit, which is the standard way because we're dealing with big ticket items, and as a result of that, then that they've still got to pay outstanding instalments on players that they've signed 2 or 3 years ago, and that's before they start to pay players for the forthcoming season. So that's a committed cost. They can't wriggle out and say, well, the pandemic's coming along, we still owe, for example, we still owe Southampton the final £25 million for Van Dijk, and we're not going to pay it until the pandemic finishes, because they'd be in breach of contract and they'd lose the right to his registration. So he in theory could walk away for nothing to another club. So football creditors have to be paid, and football creditors are other clubs and they are the players. So clubs have no choice but to make those payments.
And my understanding is often at this level as well, they're secured creditors as well, aren't they? So there's even if something bad happens at a football club, they're almost guaranteed their money in one way, shape, or form. One question I did have, it goes on to speak about here that of course the the profit was 207 million over 3 years, but only 29 million what they call net cash inflow. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. If we take a look at Liverpool, profit and cash aren't the same thing. So they've made money from selling Coutinho, from selling Jordan Ibe and Dominic Solanke and players of that nature. But because they've sold the players on credit, if you sell a player for £140 million, it doesn't mean that you've got £140 million in your bank account instantly, because the nature of the transaction that they had with Barcelona is the money is going to come in drips over a 3 or 4 year period. So you could sell him for 140, you might only be getting 40 up front. So therefore, instantly, you're £100 million worse off than you thought you're going to be. In due course, that will improve, but it is something to be aware of. Also, I mentioned that Liverpool have had the stadium expansion, and the reason for that is at the start of the decade, Manchester United had match day income of £110 million. Liverpool's was just over 40. So Liverpool were £60 million a season worse off compared to Manchester United. How can they address that? They can address that by increasing the capacity of the ground. Well, the thing is, that's going to cost you 80 or 90 million pounds to redevelop the main stand. That money goes straight out, but it then starts to come back in on a regular basis. So you're 20 or 30 million pounds are better off every season going forwards. But in the short term, from a cash perspective, you're not expanding the business as much as people anticipate.
Yeah, they speculate to accumulate. It's a longer term vision, and I think there's an element as well with what Liverpool have done. All their profit, from what I'm reading, has primarily come from the sale of players. So, and they have reinvested a lot of the cash in, or they have reinvested a lot of that money into other players. The problem that you have with the old adage of the net spend myth that drives fans so much is if you sell 300 million pounds worth of players and you buy 300 million pounds worth of players, fans go, we've spent nothing. The problem is, as you become more successful and you buy these players, they all come in on higher wages. So you might sell 300 million pound of income and save yourself 10 million pound a year in salaries with the outgoing players. If your new players are being paid, as we've seen, an increase of 87% in wages, suddenly your net spend isn't zero, because actually your expenditure is now higher because the new players in are costing you more on a monthly and annual basis, which again eats into your turnover and of course takes literal cash out of the business. And I think that's an area, and I get why newspapers don't delve into this too much and computer games don't, because it's, as you say, it's not the glamorous stuff. Fans don't really want to hear this. But we then get to these points where fans are pulling their hair out. Okay, well, hang on, how can we make all this profit? We're winning leagues, we're winning Champions Leagues, but we're haggling over £3 million with Bayern Munich when it comes to the signing of Thiago. We couldn't match, and Chelsea smashed Liverpool out the water with the salaries that they could afford to pay Timo Werner, and Liverpool fans seem to be struggling to understand why.
Well, I think if you're looking at this Liverpool versus Chelsea issue, you've got to start at the top of the club and the owners, and they're completely different. For Roman Abramovich, Chelsea Football Club is a pet hobby. It's a trophy asset. It's something he can indulge himself in, just like he can, he can do so with his yacht, just like he can do so with some of his other big assets. Now, Roman Abramovich sold one of his companies during the course of the summer, and that brought him £1,500 million. So spending £200 million of that on football players, he's still got over £1 billion left to muck around with. And he's gone out and he's bought some amazing paintings and things of this nature. But his cash flow is fine. He's not got a problem. If you contrast that with Liverpool Football Club, who are they owned by? Well, they're owned by FSG. What do FSG own? They own American sports franchises. So they own the Boston Red Sox. Well, the Boston Red Sox have got exactly the same problem as Liverpool. They're in the entertainment industry, and every match that takes place before an empty audience is costing them millions of dollars. Yep. If they've had to postpone matches, they've had to give money back to the TV companies. So Liverpool fans are saying, well, why are they not spending the money in Liverpool? Boston, FSG, they're based in Boston. Now, how are the people in Boston, their hometown, going to react if Liverpool if FSG say, well, we've given pay cuts to all of the staff at the Red Sox. Everybody over $50,000 have had to take a pay cut, by the way. So we're going to force you to take pay cuts, and at the same time, we're going to spend £80 million on a soccer player the other side of the Atlantic, but we can't afford to pay you your full wages. Can you see it's a non-starter from a public relations point of view, from a business point of view as well. Whereas for Roman Abramovich, he doesn't have to worry about the football business. He's made his money from, if you go to Wikipedia, apparently he made his money from selling rubber ducks in Russia, which I've taught in Russia. I don't have that many rubber ducks in my experience there.
Yeah, maybe they just all like taking 3 or 4 baths a day. Maybe it's a big industry out there. I think what's interesting when you look at the cash element, because I think cash is important, and it isn't the fact that we're looking at what the gentleman put up from the Swiss Ramble, and you look at this. Of course, it's just taken from the 2018-19 sort of. We haven't got the figures in for the latest one. You see there, Liverpool sitting on 38 million in kind of cash. When you compare that, I mean, Chelsea's is really low, but as you say, especially with FFP, one being relaxed for the next year or so, maybe being scrapped altogether with everything else that's going on with it, they can get those cash injections from their owner. But when you just look at the amount of cash in the other football teams, you only have to look at that. And again, you don't need to be a financial expert to realize, well, when it comes to this transfer window, who are going to be, generally speaking, the big spenders, and who are going to be who are going to spend less. I think what's also important to remember with Chelsea from this point is they sold Eden Hazard for what now appears to be £144 million, meaning they've got a lot more money to play with in terms of installments into themselves over the next 3 or 4 years. And of course, the sale of Morata for £50 million. So they have an additional income over the next 5 years of £200 million to play with, which is pretty much what they've spent so far this summer. So they had a kind of summer off because of their transfer ban. This just tells me that Liverpool fans for the next year or so need to buckle themselves in, because it's highly unlikely, unless they sell somebody for a large amount of money, that they're going to be spending huge sums of money buying new players, because I think it might be more thrifty and sensible and prudent for them to invest any sort of spare income they have into keeping the quality players they've got with new contracts, as opposed to the risk of buying someone that they don't know whether they're going to be a success or not.
Yeah, yes, there's that. And there's also, if you take a look at what's happened at Manchester United, Marcus Rashford has come through from the academy. Mason Greenwood has come through from the academy. Chelsea have brought through quite a few players, Reece James, Tammy Abrahams, and so on, Mason Mount. Liverpool, as yet, have not done that, but that we started to see those players coming through post-lockdown. So it could be that Jurgen Klopp has said, well, I could go and spend £150 million this summer. But actually, I want to give Jones and Brewster and some of these other players who do look very, very promising indeed. I want to give them their opportunity to play in the first team, because otherwise, what signal is that sending out to your young players? So it could be that there's two issues here. Is it can't pay, or is it won't pay because we think actually that we've got players who are worth 40 or 50 million pounds as far as their market position is concerned, who are coming through our youth ranks. And every time that you do that, you think about how much Rashford and Greenwood have saved Manchester United. Well, that's money that can be spent on improving the training facilities, on improving the medical facilities. Why have Liverpool been so incredibly successful over the course of the last couple of years? One of the reasons is how many injuries have they had? They've had hardly none. And the reason for that is that they've invested in sports science. They've invested in improving their medical facilities. They've invested in their training facilities. And none of that's exciting for us as fans.
Yeah, true.
But it means that Virgil Dijk starts 38 games a season instead of 28. And if Liverpool had lost Van Dijk for the period that Manchester City had been without Aymeric Laporte last season, they wouldn't have won the Premier League by that huge margin. So sometimes the money that's spent on the dull things within a club can be the difference between success and non-success. Does it sell newspapers? No. Does it get fans excited? No. But on a match-by-match basis, you're getting an extra 5 games out of him, an extra 5 games out of him. There's less disruption as far as the club is concerned. And I'm whilst I work in Liverpool, as I think people know, and I've lived most of my life in Manchester, even an outsider, I look at that Liverpool side and say, well, okay, who are they going to buy that's actually going to improve the starting 11?
Yeah.
And
it's a great point. It's such a great point. I made this point to Liverpool fans. I think the Thiago deal is one they want because I think he makes a difference to the actual team. But I also see why I understand why, if I put banter aside, which a big part of our channel is banter, we're fans talking football. So there is an element where you don't need to be professional every minute because we're not a professional company. We're not even a company. We're a bunch of fans talking football. When I put my financial head on, I understand why Liverpool don't want to commit to spending large amounts of money this summer. We don't quite know when fans are going to be allowed back. As we've said, Liverpool dropped £90 million to improve their stadium, and the idea was to improve their revenue by multiple millions of pounds a month so they could catch the revenues of the Chelseas and the Man Uniteds and the Cities, however that may be done. That's now gone, and we have no idea when that's coming back. We also have no idea as to whether or not football is going to be interrupted again. All the signs look pretty good, but you just never know when the weather turns cold again what's going to happen, and it's up in the air. And I think Liverpool are taking a bit of a calculated gamble to say, let's not spend any major money this summer. We still think we can win the league. As you've said, Kieran, we've improved that. Our medical facility is great. The players stay fit. We've got great training facilities. We've already got a world-class squad. I think we can retain our title with barely spending a penny of money, relatively speaking, if you compare us to the other top 6. And then if nothing bad happens, fans start coming back in halfway through the season or towards the end of the season, that puts them in a very strong position next summer to spend money because they've barely spent for 2 summers. And I think that, you'll start to see the amortization will start to drift away because players they bought 3 or 4 years ago, those payments have now come to an end as an example. They haven't really added anything new to that because they've barely bought anybody of any real sort of size. Equally, if something does go wrong, and let's just say football's cancelled for 5 months this time, or it's completely cancelled halfway through the season, the Chelsea's, the Man Uniteds, Spurs, like they're going to spend, they could be the teams in real financial difficulty for 2 or 3 years because they've now committed to all these new players, especially Man United, who look like they might be dropping £108 million on Jadon Sancho. They're going to be in a situation where their income could be hampered by more than 25, 30, 35, 40%. They could find themselves in a very difficult situation for 2 or 3 years where they can't spend. And Liverpool then sat there laughing. I think they're taking a calculated risk in terms of losing their title, but from a financial standpoint, there's almost no risk at all. Liverpool are putting themselves into a position where whatever happens this season, financially moving forward from 2021 onwards, they're going to be in a very powerful and comfortable position. That's kind of how I interpret it and how I'm sort of reading it, if that makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'm entirely with you, Terry. They are looking at FSG as a whole, and the number of employees they employ in both Merseyside and Boston, trying to preserve jobs. And people say, well, what I always say to fans who are complaining about lack of spend, what would you rather have? Would you rather Liverpool went down the Arsenal route of making a huge number of redundancies 3 days after winning the FA Cup and then signing Willian on 200 grand a week? Yeah, that just looks absolutely awful. Liverpool have, they made an error taking up the furlough, and Liverpool fans, and I share an office with a Liverpool season ticket holder, and he was absolutely furious. He's, the Liverpool, they've got this logo or this slogan, "This means more." But he says, well, that doesn't mean more. It means, this is not what I sign up for. This does not represent me as a Liverpool fan. And to be fair to the club, they listened. They're not spending money in the market because the manager probably feels he doesn't need to. So if he's happy with the squad, and let's face it, he's a lot closer to the squad than we are. If he doesn't feel he needs the squad to increase the squad, because it could be if Timo Werner had come in on the wages that Chelsea are paying him, you could have 4 or 5 players who've got contracts which says we have to have our pay matched to the highest earner. So it's not just the 200 grand that Werner's on, it's an extra 20 grand for him, 30 grand for him, and all of a sudden it's costing you not 10 million pounds a year, but an extra 25 in wages because of existing contracts with other players.
And if you're already at a point where, as you say, that profit you've made over 3 years, including all the new TV money, all the extra commercials, all the prize money that you've won for being successful, the only reason you made an actual profit is through selling players. Now, you don't want to sell any of your top players to make a profit. And I made that point the other day to somebody that fans have got to stop looking at football through rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the financial side. If you're Timo Werner, if you're Kai Havertz, 2 players heavily linked with Liverpool before the pandemic hit, if you're one of those players and the best team in the world over the last 2.5 years says, we want you, my view is, well, you're already at the top. That means you want me and you're prepared to spend 40, 50, 60, 70 million plus buying me. That means you want me to keep you at the top. I want to come in as one of your top earners. You do that with any business. If you join a very successful bank, a very successful university, and they want to bring you in a senior position, which very much a Timo Werner and Kai Havertz in relative terms would be senior positions to come in and play, I want my salary to match that of all the other senior people. I don't care if someone's been there 25 years, got tenure, been their man and boy. You're bringing me in to be their counter, to be on par with them. I want to be paid the same. And I think that's what Liverpool fans have now suddenly got to get used to. People are going to want to join them, and they're going to want to be compensated at the same rate as other top-level strikers joining the best teams in the world. And that means everybody's salary then increases, because whether they've got the clauses in their contract, like you say, or suddenly Mo Salah knocks on the door and says, look, Timo Werner's come in. He ain't won nothing here yet. He's on 250 a week. That's 30 grand more than me. I want a pay rise. Mane wants a pay rise. And I'm not pointing this at Liverpool fans. All fans tend to have this notion of, our players wouldn't do that. There's such great respect. They love the manager. It's like, no, they will do it because they're human beings and they want to be compensated for their talents, and absolutely rightfully so in relation to doing that. And it's how Man United got themselves into this mess when you were allowing the Phil Jones and the Lingards to be paid 120 grand a week. But that was because of what people well above them were earning, and the agents push it, and the clubs find themselves in a position where actually, we're going to need to either restructure how we do things, or we're going to fall behind. That's what United have pretty much done. It's more of a bonus related, there's your base. You can get to the 300 grand a week, but we've got to be winning and you've got to be scoring, as opposed to throwing what they did at the Alexis Sanchez of this world. And we've been seeing with him a week in, he didn't want to be here. Liverpool fans, trust me, the way you're running your club, all banter aside, financially, you're going to be in a good position as far as I'm concerned for the next 5 to 10 years. You're not going to end up with multiple millions of pounds of debt like United have got. Chelsea spend all this money, but like I said to many Chelsea fans, you owe about £1.4 billion in loans to Roman Abramovich. Now, he might say that he's got no want to bring them back in. Who knows who's going to take over that estate one day? Who knows what at any point someone from the Abramovich family might just say, yeah, we're going to cash in on that. And the irony is the debt's worth more than the club. So that's still a little thing that I still look at that maybe 10, 20 years in the future. That could be something that really hinders Chelsea. It might not. He might write it all off. He might sell a yacht. He might, go back into selling rubber ducks, as you put it, and pay and like write that debt off. But the fact that it's just sitting there, that should still be a worry to them. But I suppose that's another conversation for another day, Kieran. But I appreciate very much you coming on. I know you're very, very busy at the minute, and there's a lot of stuff going on with Derby and Wigan and other clubs from a financial standpoint. Which is, yeah, I mean, did you feel that? One thing I did want to ask, actually, and my head ain't been, I had a finger on the pulse on this. Have the Premier League done anything to support the lower level clubs since the pandemic? Like, there was almost this talk of parachute payments going right down the leagues. Has there been anything discussed in that realm, or has it pretty much been sort of pulling the ladder up and saying we're okay, Jack?
They did advance some money when the pandemic first hit, but that wasn't extra money. That was just accelerating some money that was due to EFL clubs. At present, there are no additional funds coming from the Premier League. Though to be fair to the Premier League, they've got a £300 million rebate to give to Sky and BT over the course of the next 2 seasons. They've just lost the Chinese TV deal, and as far as Matchday is concerned, the match day income in the Premier League, £600 million a year, if matches don't take place behind closed doors. And we've seen today that 2 Manchester City players have tested positive for COVID. This thing isn't going away. And we've seen the number of cases creeping up. Every day that number of cases increases is a further day away from being able to have matches taking place before meaningful numbers of fans.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it's why it's still important for people to social distance as and when they can. It's important to just follow the rules, and I know we've seen 2 big examples of Mason Greenwood and Phil Foden breaking those things. And look, I have sympathy in the fact that they are, although they're professional footballers earning a fortune, they are still, in my terms, my age. I look at them as kids. I look at them as almost children, although one of them is a father himself. But I can understand mistakes are made in relation to that. But still, too many people I see, not wearing the mask, not washing their hands, saying things aren't real. And, I say this to a lot of football fans. You might be one of these sort of people that disbelieves it, but trust me, it's real. And the more rules you break, the harder it is for your sports to come back, your boxing to come back. And, you want bars to stay open, restaurants to stay open. And there are livelihoods at stake here as well. And I'm not really worried about the footballers not having a reduction in pay. It's more, you look at Arsenal, as you mentioned, 55 redundancies of I would say, generally working class people. You don't want to see that echoing across all levels because it becomes difficult. And you've got all the match day businesses. They're the ones that I worry about, the restaurants, the cafes, the bars, who, especially in the London areas where the rents are ridiculous or the mortgages are ridiculously high, without the match day revenue and foot flow, those businesses will go out. There's, during the furlough times, businesses were being propped up and supported. But there comes a point where that stopped, if it hasn't stopped already. And if there's no match day for another year, those businesses will quite literally collapse. And then that's their families and everybody else affected. So, I think everybody's got to try and pull together to ensure we're back as soon as we can, because it impacts everybody in a positive way. And I think that's where people just need to be a little less selfish and understand that, your actions and your irresponsibility at times could, butterfly effect, maybe it ain't just you. It's a combination. If 1,000 people are doing what you're doing, that can impact someone's business later on down the line. I think we just all need to be a little bit more mindful of that in our actions, I think.
Yeah, it's not easy, and especially if you are young, because if you get COVID, you're going to be fine. In all probability.
Yeah,
it's going to be a pain in the backside for a few days, and that's it. Certainly, looking at the people that are being affected, it's people with pre-existing conditions, it's people in certain age groups, it's people in certain other demographics as well. But we do have a collective responsibility, because we've all got a gran, or many of us have still got a gran or a mum or a dad, whoever it's going to be, or an aunt or an uncle. I went to a funeral 3 weeks ago. My uncle had COVID, so it's no fun.
No, I agree. My side of the family, a couple of great aunts. I haven't really spoke about much online. Passed away because of it, and it's not nice at all. And it's from my point of view, as I say, if I get it, I might not even notice I got it. It might just feel like a bad cold or something. But it's more, well, who can I pass it on to? Who else can catch it? What else can I do with it? And I still think that has to remain true. Like, my kids both had colds this week. Including my daughter, who's gone back to nursery. I got it. It's like, I stayed in all weekend. I didn't go and see anybody, because it's that case of, well, I need to, be sensible with it. Does that make sense? Like you just do those things because you need to be sort of mindful of others and whatnot. But Kieran, I appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. Very valuable. Hopefully, Liverpool fans, you've taken something away from that. If you were feeling a bit confused, even by the thread, because it is confusing. I mean, I've worked in finance for 15 years, and I'm not an accountant, so I don't have any accounting skills. So there are elements that I don't quite get. But I appreciate you helping to bring that to life for us somewhat. I really, really do.
Always a pleasure to be invited on the show, Terry. So thanks very much.
Not a problem at all. Take it. Everyone who's tuned in, please hit that like button, hit the share button as well. And we'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye-bye.